My name is Omar Elizondo, and I'm going to give you an overview of how to write a lab report. In fact, I just said it was an overview, and that's not really what we're going to be doing. We're going to be going into some details. So you do not need to rush watching this video. Take your time. I want you to be able to fully understand what you need to do. So don't rush it. Take your time, because this is a lengthy document. So let's talk about what is the purpose of a lab report. The purpose of a lab report is to persuade people. You need to convince people, the readers of your report, of your research, the validity of your research, the importance, the significance, how it contributes to the field. It is a great way to convince anybody who's reading your documents of your credibility, of your research. So when you write a lab report, you need to write it and edit it and write it and edit it. You need to do this repeatedly and consider the vocabulary you're using, because you need to convince the reader of your research. This is very important. And if in the future, if you plan to get a thesis, get a doctorate, or anything like that, you need to write credibly, and you need to write in the fashion that is designated by your field. So we want to teach you, or I want to teach you how to write a lab report, because I want you to teach your future students how to correctly write a lab report. Now, the lab report you're going to be doing right now is not necessarily going to be what your high school or middle school students will be writing, but they need to be able to persuade the reader of what they are doing and the credibility to their research. So let's take a look at the format. Actually, I can zoom in here. Let me zoom in a bit, make it nice and big. So the format is important because, once again, whether it's a thesis, a publication, or any paper that you need to submit for any course, there's typically a format that's required for your paper. And the format is usually the parts. These are the parts of the paper. So we're going to start with a title, an abstract, an introduction, the hypothesis, materials and methods, results and analysis, discussion, and literature cited. Every single one of these has requirements, okay? Those requirements are outlined in this document, but I'm also doing it through this video to give you an idea of what exactly you need to do. And I'm going to go through each one of these, okay? Now, I went ahead and linked my master's thesis from when I first got my first master's in science. And it's just an example of what you should eventually be able to do. You should eventually be able to get to the point where you can write a thesis level scientific paper. And whether in the future, if you choose to get a degree in education or social sciences or mathematics, the formats are usually the same. You're writing to convince the reader of how valid your research is. Okay. So we're going to get started with the title. The title does not have to be very long. As I state here, it should be less than 10 words, but it doesn't need to be extremely long. It also needs to be a statement, okay? A good title is straightforward, and it uses keywords that researchers in a particular field will recognize. Now, for the title for this, since it's a lab report, you need to include the course, the university name, the course name, the section, and the semester, all right? Now, I have a hint here. Your title should be a statement that leads the reader to understand what they are going to read. So it's a statement. Do not put a question mark. It's a statement. A lot of middle school and high school students like to use question marks. It's not a question, it's a statement. You're making a statement, right? So it's important that you do this so that way it's very clear what is the objective of the paper itself. And I highly recommend that your title be written last. It should be one of the last things you write. It's one of the first parts of your lab report, but it's one of the last things you write. So here's an example in yellow of how it should look, except I don't have a title. You need to have a title. It needs to be a large title, maybe about 14 or 16 font. And underneath it, you'll have your name, the university, the course, and the semester. And this should be on the first page. The first page and nothing else on there. So it's your title page. So let me repeat myself. It should be a statement. It should also be the last thing you write, and it should stand on its own. It does not need to have it does not have to have other text on it. Just the title page, and that's it. Next up is the abstract. Okay, up next is the abstract. Now, the abstract is a very powerful part of your lab report. First, abstracts are typically what individuals read if they wanted to determine if they were going to go to a presentation or if they were going to read your paper further. Think of it like a preview. You know, when you go to the movies and they call them trailers, which means they should come at the end of the movie, but often it's before the movie, right? It's the preview of upcoming movies. That's kind of what your abstract is. You're telling the audience what your paper is about. So the purpose is so that the reader can read it and determine, do I actually want to read the rest of this report? Is it applicable to me? Is it something that I even understand? So an abstract is not very long. It's actually about 200 words. And what you're going to do in your abstract, it's a summary. You're going to tell me the purpose of this report, a hint of the data that was presented, and some of the major conclusions. And it's not very long. It's 200 words max. And 200 words is still pushing it. Now, I do have a guide here that can help you on how to write an abstract. And this is a very good guide because it's a reference to the APA style. That's the format in which you're writing your paper, APA. So all the things that I want you to be able to be using are reference to APA writing style. And the reason we use APA is because that way all papers should have the same structure, the same rules. So this will help you on how to write an abstract. Like the title, this should be one of the last things you write. I have that here as my hint. The abstract should be one of the last sections you write because it's a summary, an overview, a preview of the paper. So the first two parts of your paper, the title as well as the abstract, should be the last things you write. At that point, your title and your abstract should be very simple to write because you've written the rest of the paper. Okay, up next is the introduction. There's a lot here. So let's just look at how long the introduction section is. We have a couple of things that we need to look at here. It's not very long, actually. I thought it was longer. But the reason I want to emphasize the introduction is because the introduction is going to involve your references. All right, so let's talk about it. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about this. So the introduction defines the subject of the report. That means you're going to tell the audience, the reader, what is the purpose of this report? What is the information they need to know? So I'm going to highlight it right here. You tell them what is the information or the sufficient background for them to be able to understand what's going on in this report. All right. So this is where your peer-reviewed journal articles comes in. The introduction is not the introduction to a story or to a book. It comes with the introduction of your research, but it's supported by peer-reviewed papers. So when I ask you to look at peer-reviewed papers, this is where I want it to be. I want you to reference that in your introduction. All right? So tell the reader everything they need to know. And you need to use information that comes from other published articles or reputable textbooks or reputable websites. Not blogs, not Facebook pages. It has to come from reputable resources. And you put those here. Okay, so be sure that you give the reader all the information they need, as well as the reference in which that information came from. So let's take a look at the hints. First, you're not going to write in the first person. You're making statements. You want to make statements and you want to have a sense of active writing. So be sure that you're not saying I or we or us. You're writing as a statement. So if you see that a statement that says, I mixed the chemicals, you might want to change that statement to the chemicals were mixed. And that's not even very detailed, but we'll get into that later. Try not to write in the past tense. Sometimes it's difficult, I get it, but you want to make an attempt to write in the active sense. Okay, so as I stated previously, this is where you're going to have your background information and your literature. So you need to read scientific papers before you come up with your own paper. When you find a paper that supports what you have to say or has something interesting you want to reference, you keep the paper and then you reference it. How you reference it, I will go over that a little bit later, okay? Now, when in doubt, you want to make as many statements as possible that come from peer reviewed. I don't really want to know your thoughts on the matter. I want to know what other people's thoughts on the matter, and then your original ideas can come later in the paper. So you want to make statements, but they are not your statements. You should use references from scientific publications and peer-reviewed textbooks, reputable resources. So no blogs, nothing like that. If you're going to use a website, it has to come from a reputable website that's maybe a government website, a research website, a scientific journals and publications. That's what you want. Now, there's a couple of things that you want to answer in your introduction. Mainly, think of it this way: the who, what, when, where, why, how. All right. So why is this even being done? Why are you performing this study? Why have previous researchers performed this study? Why? That's one of the important things. Why am I reading this paper? Why is it relevant? Let me move this a little bit. What knowledge already exists about this subject? So that knowledge should come from peer-reviewed articles, reputable websites, the literature that already exists. Okay? So find resources that are going to help you in your introduction, in that writing. You want to convey that previous knowledge is built on this, and you are going to add to it. Oh, I think I have this. Okay. So what is the specific purpose of this study? This is important. So why are you doing this study? You've told me about the previous information using peer-reviewed articles and previous literature. But why are you doing this study? What is so interesting about it? But remember, you're going to be writing in the active sense. You're not going to be writing in the passive sense. And you're also going to be writing formally. So with that regard, make your statements. You want to tell me why it's a specific purpose of study, why you're doing it, but remember, don't talk in the first sense. Now, typically, in your introduction, embedded in there is the hypothesis. A real scientific publication typically doesn't have a section just for the hypothesis, but we are for this paper. After your introduction, which should be about 2 to 3 to 4 or 5 pages, depending on how much background information there needs to be, I want you to clearly write your hypothesis, because I want your middle school and high school students to do that. Your hypothesis needs to be written in the if-then logic. If this happens, then this happens. And remember, it should be written if, and then whatever your independent variable is, tell me about that, and then whatever the results will be, the dependent variable. An example may be, if salt is added to water, then it will boil faster. So I know in that scenario, the independent variable is salt, different concentrations of salt, and the dependent variable is the time it takes for the water to boil. I want you writing this way because I want your middle school and high school students to understand the if-then logic, that it includes the independent and the dependent variables. Okay? So right there, we've talked about your intro. Let me just repeat a little bit with the intro. There's a lot going on here. It's a lot of information. Make statements from peer-reviewed literature. And your hypothesis is just a statement, it's just a sentence, but I do want a section devoted to it, and it has to use the if-then logic. Next up, let's talk about materials and methods. Okay, so for your materials and methods, it's kind of obvious what we're talking about here: materials and methods. So I want you to look at them in two different formats. First, we're going to talk about the materials, and we're going to talk about how you should write that down. And then we're going to talk about the methods and how you should write that down. What you are providing people, the readers, with here is a list of everything you used in your experiment. But you're also going to tell them in detail how you did your experiment. Okay? So here's what we're going to do. Let's start with the materials. Let me just scroll up here. What materials were used? Be specific. Did you use water? Okay, but what kind of water? Purified, filter, acidic, basic? Be specific. How much water? It needs to be in the metric system. We are not going to be using the imperial system. We will be using the metric system. So did you use a liter, 500 milliliters? Don't use gallons. Don't use ounces. We will be using the metric system. Did you use an organism? If you happen to have used an organism, you give me the name of the organism and you give me the scientific name of that organism. Did you use salt? What kind of salt? Kosher salt? Iodized salt? Sea salt? Pink salt? Himalayan salt? How much? 2 grams? 5 grams? Tell me exactly what you used. If you used a computer program, tell me what was the computer program. You might even want to link the website or the producer of the manufacturer, of that, right? So you can never, you can be too specific, but also you can also never be too specific because it's important. Let's go back to my water analogy. I told you, is it purified water? Is it filtered water? Is it rainwater, acidic, basic? What was the pH of the water? But you can also tell me the manufacturer of the water. Is it Dasani? Did you use Hill Country Fair water? Be specific, okay? So think of it like a recipe. I need to know exactly what you used. Exactly. Don't tell me you used salt. Did you use kosher salt? I need to know so that way I can replicate this experiment. So you're going to tell me what materials were used, and you're going to tell me how you use them, right? So the how is kind of the methods. The methods is kind of like a recipe. Exactly what did you do? Remember, you're not going to be writing in the first sense. So tell me that 2 grams of iodized salt was added to the mixture of dough and sugar. Make it very specific. Detailed. The purpose of materials and methods is so that when you give this report to someone in a different country, they can replicate your experiment. They know exactly what you used, what equipment you used, what organisms you used. They know what was mixed, what was heated, and it's in the metric system, so they're fully aware that they know what temperature, what measurement you used. Be specific. Now, the materials and methods does not have to be very long. It's usually about a page to two, well, probably about 2 pages, because your materials is very short, but your methods might be lengthy. Go into detail. If you're using any software, tell me what version you're using, okay? So be sure you clarify that. So where and when was the work done? Was it done in a lab? Was it done in a kitchen? Was it done in a specific ecosystem? What altitude? If you're doing something outdoors, tell me the GPS location as to where this occurred. I need to know this information, all right? So the materials and methods is like a recipe. You're giving it to someone else so that they can replicate the experiment. You probably cannot be too detailed. There's a chance you could be. There's a chance you could overkill the reader with information, but it's better that they know exactly what they need and how to do it. So the materials and methods, consider it from 2 perspectives: the materials part and the methods part. Detail. Okay, next up, we're going to talk about the results. Okay, so let's talk about results. Results are the section of your paper where you're just giving me the results. You're just telling me what you got from your experiments, okay? So it says here, the results section should summarize the data from the experiments without discussing their implications. So you're not going to discuss the results. You're just going to give them to the reader. We will discuss them during the discussion part of the paper. So what we need to consider next is how we're going to put our results together. And that's going to involve tables, figures, images, the data, the results. Okay? Now, the way you want to look at results is you need to look at them in a certain way where they are set up and they can stand alone. They do not need you to be there to explain the actual graphs. They should be so detailed that they can stand on their own. So, figures and tables should be self-explanatory. The reader should be able to understand them without referring to the text. All the columns and rows in the tables are aligned, they have labels, they have names, and then when the reader gets to the discussion section, then they can get more details. So let's go ahead and just look at some examples, okay? These are not perfect examples, but they're really, really close. So right here, we have a bar graph. You are probably going to have a bar graph in your reports. It's one of the most easiest to read, and it's one of the most easiest to make. And it's very common. So let's take a look at this bar graph. What we have here is a title. You should have a title for your bar graph. I don't like this one because it starts with a T and then the C is lowercase and the O is lowercase, the A and the S. It should be written appropriately, okay? So this should be written appropriately. Also, it says taking color off a Skittle. Remember, it should be a statement that describes the chart, okay? So a better example of a title for this may be let me see if I can come up with this on the fly. The removal of color from a Skittle in seconds, right? So that's probably a more scientific, black and white statement title. Okay, so let's take a look at this bar graph. What we have on the x-axis is our liquid. So that is our independent variable. Our independent variable is going to be on the x-axis. And then over here we have time in seconds. That's the dependent variable. Now this is great because one, it says liquid, and these are all liquids. That helps the reader know what liquid we're looking at. Then we have the y-axis, which is time in seconds. So I know that this is a measurement of time, and I know that this is in seconds. You want to be sure to utilize the metric system. So if you're using volume, you want milliliters. If you're going to be using mass, maybe grams, milligrams, things like that. Now, I don't like this because it is not capitalized. It doesn't have the proper capitalization, but it's okay. It's better than what most middle school and high school schoolers might utilize. Okay, next we have some numbers here. I'm sorry, we have our liquids and we have some numbers. What I really like about this is that it is not a 0 to 100 y-axis. It is a y-axis that is appropriate to the data. So you can manipulate this. It doesn't have to be 0 to 100. Often students think that it has to be 0 to 100, and that's not always the case. And then I love that the actual value is right above the data point. So I can visually see, just by looking at it, that it takes a longer time for lemon juice to take the color off a Skittle than hot water. Just visually, that immediately I can see that. And then I can go ahead and look at the details. This data is really skewed. I mean, it is very skewed. So I really don't know where the reality is here. Is it 160 seconds or 300? It's probably in the middle. Next is the colors. Please use colors to differentiate different, in this case, different liquids, but different parts and different variables. Color goes a long way in helping the reader understand what they're showing here. Next, the trials are colored. That's great too. I don't like the orientation of this, but that's okay. It's better than nothing. This is a very good bar graph that needs very little improvement. I'm going to tell you this right now. Please note, you will need to have error bars. I'm going to show you how to put in error bars in your data reports. Okay? It takes a little bit of statistics to do it, but I'll show you how to do that. So this does not have error bars. On this right here, I would assume the error bars would be very big because it's such a wide distribution of data. Right here, they would probably be very close. Right here, they would be a little bit closer. But I don't know that because it's a statistical analysis. I will show you how to do that. But you won't need it for your first inquiry, but you will need it for the others. Let's take a look at a line graph. This is also a very good line graph that's used maybe to show measurement over time. So in this case, take a look at the start with the title. Same thing with the capitalization, that's an issue, but look at how it's a statement. It's very clear. The number of bubbles produced per minute by a plant. Now it says plant X. I would want you to give me the species of the plant as well as the common name in various depths of water. This is awesome. This is telling me, just by looking at it, that the deeper we go into the water, the shorter the plant is going to be able to produce. The less number of bubbles the plant is going to be able to produce. We have our x-axis. I know how deep it is, and it's in meters, which is correct. We have our y-axis, which is the number of bubbles per minute. Wonderful. This is a really good line graph. I love it. And remember, you can do multiple graphs. You don't have to have a legend for this one because they only have one data set. But if you have multiples, you want to have a legend and you want to have different colors. Really easy, good stuff to do. And I want to talk about charts. Now, this chart is just a chart. It shows me gender, age in years, and ethnicity. The way this chart is set up is very, very good. If you're going to make a chart and for some reason you need to show me anything, make sure that you make it user-friendly. What I would do here is maybe use different colors for different ranges, but APA requires that it be black and white. But for this class, I think color would be really good because it's easy to remove color from graphs if you needed to. It's adding it that can be a hassle. Also, this does not have a title, so it does need to have a title. So let me go back over here. This would have a title that says graph 1 and then the title. This would say line graph 1 and then the title. And this would say chart 1 and the title. If you have multiple charts, then you have chart 2 and the title, chart 3 and the title. If you have multiple line graphs, it's line graph 1. But make sure the reason you're doing that is because later you're going to reference it in the discussion. So this is what I want to see in your paper. Even if they're not perfect, it's okay. We can work on it, but this is what we want because this is what we also want for your middle school and high schoolers, and you want to have a visual representation of the data, and it really helps people to understand the data. Now, going back to the results real quick, you can give me some charts with the average. You can even give me some of the raw data, but you don't want to give so much data to your results that it's overwhelming for the reader. So let's just say we're getting the heights of people, and we got the heights of 500 people. Maybe just give me the average, and all the raw data, we can put that in an appendix. So whatever you put in your results, make sure that it has value. But what we're trying to do is to visualize our results. That's what we're trying to do. And that's the most important thing to do. You can do that on Google Sheets, and you can do that on Excel, and there's even free programs out there. And if you want to make your own, you can even make them on Canva. Okay, so I wanted to add a little bit more detail about your materials and methods, your results, or your discussion. In any of those, you can have pictures, and you should have pictures because that's going to help support that you actually conducted this experiment. All right, but many students take pictures and they're not very good. They're hard to see, they're hard to understand. Don't take the picture that's convenient for you. Take the picture that's convenient for the reader or the viewer. So I have some examples of pictures here, and I'm going to go over them. These pictures are not perfect, so I'm going to tell you what I like and what I don't like about them, so that way you can give me very good pictures. Let's take a look at this first one. In this picture, the student was putting, I think, cucumbers in different salt concentrations, like we have salt and sugar. Look at the orientation of this picture. First, this is a very small picture. Make your pictures big so that I can actually see them. Number two, this student wrote the control, the salt, and the sugar here. I don't know anything. I don't see anything. I just see cucumbers. What am I supposed to be looking at? So this should have a title and it should have a one-sentence description on the bottom. But if you see this picture, you can clearly see that control, salt, and sugar is written on a napkin. Do that on your photo. There are photo editors in which you can add text. They're free and they're online. Also, what am I supposed to get out of this picture? Now, the student probably wrote a sentence about that in the discussion or the results. But remember, the picture should also stand on its own. So I just see some cucumbers and I see that it's on napkins, and it's not a really oriented picture very well. It's at a weird angle and I can see the shadows. That's not very informative. So give me good, clear pictures. And then here's another example. This one's even worse because you can see water has gotten into the text, so I don't really see anything here. It's very, very, very odd to see. Don't give me pictures that are this, don't give me pictures that are this big. I can't even see that. Make sure the picture is viewable and I can see it. Right here we have some coins. A student was doing a statistical analysis. This is literally all the student gave me, coins. Okay, so what am I supposed to take from this? I have no title, I have no description. I literally just see a picture of coins. On the left are some coins, and on the right are what looks to be more coins. I don't really know what I'm supposed to take away from this. So please tell the reader what they need to know. All right. And we can also make this larger, make those pictures bigger. So I do want pictures, but make sure they are applicable to what you're showing the audience. Here's another one. This one says Garmin and Apple line graph with error bars. I don't know how that title is related to these pictures, and I cannot really see anything on the pictures. I see that there's two watches. One is black and one is white. So I assume one is Apple and one is Garmin, but I don't understand what I'm supposed to take away from these pictures. Here we have a black one on the left and the white one on the right. Here we have a black one on the left and a white one on the right. Here we have a black one on the bottom and over here on the top. What is the purpose of these photos? I'm very, very confused. So yes, there's photos, and yes, you're showing me you did some work, but what am I supposed to take away from this? I don't know. Remember, it's not about you, it's about the reader, so that they understand. So right here in this picture, let me go ahead and zoom in, because once again, I'm not thinking of you, I'm keeping the picture small. What this person was doing was they were dividing a paper plate and using different food coloring with honey, and they were trying to figure out if ants were attracted to a certain color. This is a very detailed picture. It's not perfect, but it's okay. I have an idea of the sections. I know what the red outline is. Apparently there's a blue outline right here in the middle. Okay. A black outline and the green outline. It's described. I know what each section is. I can read about it, right? Because it's in quadrants, the person can even put A, B, C, or D, so I know what quadrant we're talking about. This is very informative to the reader. It's very informative. But it does need a title, and it does need a little short description. Right here, this is a better idea. One, these are just three different, I guess these are, I'm going to call them voltmeters. I don't exactly know what they are. But look, picture 1.1. This picture shows the setup to measure voltage. Great. This one's to set up resistance. This one's to set up current. Okay, that's great. I can see them pretty clearly. It's not perfectly aligned. Like, it's a little bit difficult to see up here, but it's better than some of these other photos, right? So it needs to be informative. It needs to have a description. And then when you write about these images, you can say, according to picture 1.2, and then you can talk about picture 1.2. so you can reference it later. Now, this is some pictures here. This is what I get from a lot of students. This student has pictures of water cups, and if I look really hard, it says time in white vinegar. And then I see some writing here, but I can't really see it. It's a weird angle. Maybe this is good for you when you're doing the experiment, but for your picture, the text should be down here so I can see it. There needs to be a description. So please make it so that I can see what's going on and what's labeled here. I can't really see here. This is a much better description because this student was trying to see if eggs will bounce, and they used their iPhone to use slow motion measurements. This is better. Screenshots from slow motion video used to obtain measurements for bounce height. Awesome. Is there any additional information I need to know about this, right? Because both pictures look kind of the same. So are they different or are they the same? What do I need to know taken away from that? Here's some more pictures. These are at a weird angle. This is at a much better angle. I get a better view of what it looks like. But remember, your pictures have to be informative. They have to be a little bit binary. This is a picture of the student placing boiled eggs in an individual cup. That's awesome. Is that relative? Is it valuable to the reader? If it is, go ahead and put it. If it's not, maybe not have the picture. But I do like that the student is in the photo, so that's telling me she's actually doing this experiment. So you might want to include a photo of yourself in it, you actually doing the work. But remember, is this photo special? Did she place the boiled eggs in the individual cup in a special way that the reader does need to see this picture? So think about it. Is it really valuable? And right here, this is a decent picture outline, but I can't really see the titles here. So it's kind of difficult, right? So these are just some examples of photos and some of the things I like and don't like about them. I need your photos to be informative. I need them to convey information to the reader. I do want you to have photos. I don't want to tell you that having photos is a bad thing and that not having photos is a bad thing. You want to have some photos, but they need to be quality photos and they need to be labeled. They need to have a title and a short description. And the most important thing, it has to be worthwhile for the reader. It has to have a purpose. Don't put photos just for the sake of putting photos. So ask yourself, can the reader see it? Can the reader understand what is the purpose of this picture and the importance of this picture? And does the reader need to see this picture? So please reconsider your photos. Give me the best photos you can get. Pretty much everybody has phones, so you have a camera. If you have an iPhone, you can include even some links to videos if you want to show something in slow motion. But don't take the picture for yourself. Take it for the reader. Okay, so next let's talk about the discussion. Okay, the discussion. So the discussion it's like an extension to the results. The results were just like, that's what we have. That's what we got from our experiment. Those are the results. Think of it like a test score. I got an 82. That's it. That's what the results are. Your discussion is why I got an 82 and what that means. So this is kind of like a restatement of the results, but you need to tell the reader your interpretation of the data. And you need to connect it to the information that you brought up in your introduction. So that information from the introduction, it cannot be pointless information. It has to have a purpose. And here you can go back to your data. You can go back to the intro and discuss how your data supports the information from the intro, challenges that information. You can do that, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start with the actual results, so that way we know how it works. Tell me what the results are. So you remember these charts and graphs? Go through each one and explain to the reader your interpretation of the data. So remember, this is supposed to say uh, chart 1 or chart 2. So you would write chart 1 suggests, and then you'd make your statement. Tell me about chart 1. Then tell me about chart 2. And tell me how they contradict each other, or how they support each other, and how they support the data. All you're doing in your discussion is telling me what the results mean. You have to tell me what the results mean, as well as connecting it to the larger aspect, which is the information from the introduction. So you see how everything's working together? They're either supporting each other. That information from the introduction is supporting your data supporting that information, or it's challenging it, things like that. You have to do this. Here's what you have to do. You have to tell me if you accept or reject your hypothesis. You are not proving anything. I do not want to see this proves the hypothesis. You are not proving anything. You are supporting or rejecting. You are accepting or you are rejecting your hypothesis. That's it. You need to connect your hypothesis and the information to the introduction, and you need to tell me what every single individual report from your results means and the interpretation. So this is why the results over here and the discussion, they're kind of the same thing, but they have different purposes and they have different functions. So your results are just going to be the graphs, the information, and the discussion is going to be the writing of that information. So your discussion should be lengthy. You can also include any statements from any peer-reviewed articles or papers that you feel are important here. But remember, embedded within all that, you need to tell me, are you accepting or rejecting your original hypothesis? All right? So now that you have finished your paper, you're going to write down your conclusion. The conclusion does not have to be very long. You're bringing your paper to a close, and you will do this after your discussion. Your conclusion's about a paragraph long, which is about, let's say, 5 to 8 sentences. It's not very long, but bring it to a conclusion. You can repeat yourself a little bit. You can support or reject your hypothesis. You can go over the results a little bit, but you're bringing everything to a close. You're giving it a bookend, okay? But be sure you also acknowledge any contributors to your research or to your experiment. It doesn't matter how minor they were or how major they were. Be sure to list any contributors. If I helped you with your experiment, list me. If anyone else did, list them as well. It's just a polite and professional courtesy. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to cite literature. I know that many of you don't know how to cite literature. It's okay. You probably had to do it when you were taking an English composition course, and maybe you had to do it a little bit for some of your science courses, but most students don't know how. I get it. It's okay. I'm going to show you how to do it, and I'm even going to give you some cheat sheets. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to one of the cheat sheets. Let me pull that up. Here we go. We are currently in the APA 7th edition. So the APA 7th edition has a bunch of cheat sheets on how to do this. This cheat sheet, I promise you, is going to be good for several years. But if there's ever an 8th edition, which there will be, they'll probably have a cheat sheet for that. So I'm going to show you how you should do this. This is a cheat sheet on how to use journal articles, which is you're going to be using, books, chapters in an edited book, so like a textbook, if you just want to pick a specific chapter. So these 3 are the most common that you're likely going to use. What you need to do is print this out and have it with you. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. All right, so for our journal article, it tells you how to write every single part of your reference. First, you start with the author, and it tells you invert name so that the last name comes first, followed by a comma, and then the initials. Leave a space between the initials and retain the order of the author's name. So you're going to go in the order of the paper. So this might say Elizondo, comma, O dot R dot, comma, and then you want to have an ampersand. And then you do that for all the authors. Next, the year has to be in parentheses and it ends with a period. Next is the title of the article. The title of the article, go ahead and write this on your notes. Do not italicize. You do not italicize that. Okay, so that has to be straight. You're going to see why that's beneficial a little bit later. Next, you capitalize only the first letter of the first word. Everything else is lowercase. Name of the periodical. You capitalize all the major words in the periodical. You do italicize the volume number, but you do not italicize the issue number. The page range, so it might be page 25 through 36, and the DOI. The DOI is kind of like the URL of the paper. This is how you have a journal article. Let's go to the book. Book is pretty much the same thing, but there's some differences. Go ahead and read it, and you'll see that we have to invert the names. The copyright of the year, you capitalize only the first letter of the first word, and then it says italicize the title. Look over here. Our title over here was do not italicize. Here you do italicize the title. Then you want to have the publisher and the DOI and the URL number. This cheat sheet is a great way to double check your work. You're like, man, that's a lot of work. How do I do this? I'm going to give you another cheat sheet. This is my favorite generator. I use it all the time. So this is called CiteFast. And look, I have some references here from my own work. Of course, these are references for education because I'm working on a doctorate in education. You start by picking the one you want, the citation style you want. We're going to be in APA 7. And let's just go ahead and determine what do we want? A web page, a book, a journal, or are there other things you want to reference? Okay? You can do it manually. That helps too. But you want to do your searches here. So here's some previous searches that I had. Let's go ahead and, I don't know, let's just pick supporting English language learners. I'm going to click search. And you get a list of authors, right? This doesn't mean that this is the one you're looking for, but I remember this one. This wasn't that far, and I remember it was this one with Shelley. So I'm going to click on it, and I can edit it. I can check it, make sure all of the papers are here. Now remember, you're supposed to already have this paper from the library. I'll show you how to do that, but I'm showing you how to make references right now. But go ahead and check everything, right? And compare this to the cheat sheet. Make sure that, in this case, it says the title of the article, it says do not italicize, right? So the final product, it should not be italicized. Look at the authors. Make sure everything is correct. It says capitalize only the first letter of the first word. I got to make sure, okay, only supporting is capitalized. I do capitalize ELLs, that's important. But everything else, okay, this looks good. This looks good. There's my DOI number. And I'll click Save Citation. And there it is. It's right here for me. I'll click Copy and Paste. And let me get my paper right here. I got it. I can copy that and put it in my references. So I'm going to copy that. And I'm just going to put it on this piece of paper so that you can see. Put a little space here. There it is. But I'm not done yet. We want these to have what's called a hanging indentation. So I'm going to show you how to do that. You need to go to, let's see here, is it Format? Here we go. Yes, go to Format, Indent, Indentation Options, Special Indent, Hanging, Apply. This is how you do it with a hanging indentation. So it looks like these other ones here. So use this APA site to help you with that. But compare the results from that with your cheat sheet so that you're doing it correctly. It's a lot easier to just check your references than it is to have to write your references. Your references, let's come back over here. I got a whole bunch of other resources here. So you need to have your references in proper order. They need to be in alphabetical order. You need to have a hanging indentation. And they need to be properly formatted, right? So I'm going to go ahead and fix this, make it a little larger. I want it to be Times New Roman. Perfect. Okay. Now we have some other examples here that you can see. We have some from various resources, and some of them are properly cited, and some are not, mainly because of the way I put them together. I didn't see these when I made the paper. But notice that these don't have hanging indentation, so these need to be fixed, right? And some of them are going to be journals, some of them are websites, all that stuff. So be sure you give this a good look as to how you cite, and you want to cite properly, okay? So next up, I'm going to show you how to actually cite in a paper. But for right now, let me summarize what we've done with our literature cited. You need to cite everything that you've talked about, mainly the stuff that's in your intro, and you need to put it here. It needs to be in alphabetical order. It needs to have the proper APA style structure. It needs to have a hanging indentation, okay? And I'll go ahead and tell you, there's no rules, but an average for a typical class, one paper is usually like 5 to 10 references. So for this course, you probably want 3 to 6 references, but that's a good way to ensure that you're making statements that are not yours. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's how you reference. Use this cheat sheet. I have some reference examples from APA style. If you have let's just say you have a chapter in an edited book, you can click on that and it will show you how to properly reference that. I have a checklist here that you can use that will help you on how to make sure that your references are correct. And then, of course, this is a citation generator. It's about 95% accurate, so that's why you want to put them in here and then double check them with the guide, okay? So the last part, I'm just going to come down over here. I'm going to show you how to reference in papers, so that way you can understand how that works. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about general styles and writing, okay? So next up is going to be referencing in a paper, in your actual introduction. When you're writing, you want to state the author's name and the year of the paper. You can embed the author's name in the text if you want. For example, this says, Fox in 1988 investigated the hormones of the nest building behavior of catbirds. So I know you're going to reference that at the end, but you've made the reference a part of a statement. Or, and this is how most people do it, they will say, actually there should be a quotation here, hormones are known to influence the nest building behavior of catbirds. And this should be like that. You should include the quotation. And then we reference the paper that I know that that's from Fox 1988. So that's a way in which you are referencing your papers in the sentence, or you're making a quotation from the sentence. So that's 2 ways you can do it. Now, if you have a paper that has a lot of authors, you probably want to start your paper with all of the authors, or their statement with all of the authors, right? So let's scroll down. So notice that it says here Smith et al. Smith et al. Et al. It means and others. So you could say a paper by Smith, Lynch, Merrill, and Beam published in 1998 would be cited as the following. Smith et al. 1989. So you're telling me that there is multiple authors, but I do know the year, 1989. So Smith et al., period, the year, and then you can make the statement. That's the best way to go in regards to you referencing in your introduction, okay? So recap. References come at the end. Use the guides and the cheat sheets. But when you're writing your paper and you're making statements in your introduction, this occurs in your introduction, be sure you're referenced properly. 99% of people reference this way. Some people reference this way. If you're going to reference multiple authors, use the meaning et al., and it will cover your bases for that. Okay? We got one more thing to talk about, and that is going to be some comments on style and writing. And that's going to help you to complete your actual writing of your first lab report. So now we just need to finish up with some general comments on how you should be writing. And This is pretty self-explanatory, so it's not too difficult. But overall, when you write your papers, make sure that all scientific names, you can include common names, but be sure that you include the scientific names, the genus and the species, and that they are italicized or that they are underlined. Your margins standard should be about 1 inch on all sides. And make sure that when you are writing and you have a new concept, that you have a new paragraph for every single new idea or concept. So be sure that you're doing that correctly. Be sure that you're utilizing the metric system. We don't want to be working in the imperial system. Just a quick note on the word data and datum. Data is for plural, so when you have multiple sets of data, or datum when you're simply talking about one singular set of data. Numbers can be tricky, so this isn't like something that I'll be very too picky about, but be sure that you are consistent with your numbers. Numbers should be written as numerals when they are, when they are more significant than 10 or associated with measurement. So you're going to see a lot of this. Like you can use like 6 millimeters or 2 grams because that's associated with the measurement. But if you're going to be discussing a number, as in the number of people, in this case, maybe 13 sunfish, 13 bass, you might want to utilize just the numerical value. But the truth is, just be consistent. Be consistent in your numbers. Be sure to divide paragraphs correctly and have them starting and ending sentences that indicate the purpose of the paragraph. Be sure that you have indentions. Every sentence has to have a subject and a verb. Make sure you're correct with that portion. As I stated previously in this video, be sure that you are writing in the first person. Avoid writing in the first person. We don't want that. Try to make in the sense of making statements rather than speaking in the first person. Avoid use of slang or any other contradictions unless it's absolutely necessary for your writing. You want to be consistent, and you're going to be able to see that a lot as you go through your writing because you don't want to be switching too much from past and present tense. Be sure that you use pronouns and they refer to antecedents because you need to be able to have good explanation and not confuse the reader. And this is probably one of the most important ones. Run your papers through Grammarly.com and use the spell checker program. Grammarly is very good, and if you pay for Grammarly, which is very expensive, but if you do happen to pay for it, it does help you modify your writing. But it's not 100% perfect, so be sure to use your spell checker as well. And there's some more information here, but this is really the final part, is you need to read your report. Read it over. This is important for not just for this class, but this is for all the papers that you'll be working on in the future. Read your report, go back and edit it. The hard part is the writing part. The easier part is the editing part. Go back, change some of the vocabulary. Grammarly will help you with a thesaurus to maybe change some of the vocabulary you want in your sentences to make them a little bit more pertinent in your writing. But read it, go over it, edit it. It's the most important thing that you can do. Learn to reread and edit your work. It's not a one-time deal. So with that in mind, after we move on to this, we have more checklists. You should definitely use this in your paper. This is all from APA. I did not write this. This is all from the APA formatting. It talks about font size. It talks about different fonts you can use, line spacing, paper organization, writing style. This is all very important information to have. But I'm not going to go over it because it is the APA resources and you're free to use those on your own. But I just felt the need to put it here for you. So this was a very long video, but it should be a great video to help you understand how you should be writing your lab reports. It's important to write lab reports clearly. It's important to be clear in what you want to say because you want to get the information and convey that to your audience. So good luck with the writing. As always, you can always send your papers to the Writing Center with UTRGV. They can give you some feedback and some insight into your writing as well. All right. So with that, thanks for watching and good luck on your lab reports.